So I've been using the new iPhone XS Max for a little over a week now. And when I sit back and think about the last year I've spent with the iPhone X, one word comes to mind, and it's incremental. Now, I'm not saying the new iPhones are bad, but they're only marginally better than last year's model. So at the end of the day, is it worth your upgrade? That's what we're here to find out. Let's get to it. So hardware-wise, the phone is incredibly familiar, right? You have metal and glass sandwich, but instead of aluminum on the enclosure, you have stainless steel. Now, there are still three hardware differences between the iPhone X and the new XS. Number one is more antenna bands. And I know this because if you look at the bottom of the phone, instead of having two symmetrical speaker grills, you have one that's now basically cut in half in order to make room for another antenna band. That's not really a big deal anyways, right? Because that's your microphone and that's where people are going to hear you as you're talking into the phone. And the other side is your speakers. So you're not losing any speaker quality, you're just gaining an antenna band, which is good. Number two, the phone is now IP68 water and dust resistant instead of IP67 on last year's model. And number three, the camera bump on the back of the phone is slightly larger because the actual camera lenses themselves have gotten slightly larger this year as well. So if you buy a case for a XS and you try and throw it on your 10, you'll notice that it fits a little larger on the back of the 10. So those are the three hardware differences, but other than that, it's really, really familiar. So display-wise, the iPhone XS uses the exact same display as the iPhone X, even down to the pixels per inch, so they're identical. The XS Max bumps up the resolution, obviously, because it's got a 6.5-inch display, but in terms of pixels per inch, it's still exactly the same at 458. So this is kind of a good and bad thing, right? Bad thing in that there's no improvement from last year, but still kind of a good thing because the iPhone X had like the best display on the market. So you can only improve so much off of the best display. But if we're talking about how good the display actually is, it's really good, right? Colors are super sharp, vibrant, and they're incredibly accurate. And this is probably good enough to go toe-to-toe with the Galaxy Note 9 as the best smartphone display on the market. So whenever you look at displays on this phone, you should really only consider screen size. Do you want the iPhone XS size, or do you want the 6.5-inch on the iPhone XS Max? That's really the only thing you should consider in terms of displays on this phone. So we've established that the hardware is really similar. We've established that the displays are essentially identical. And the other cool tidbits of the hardware are also back, right? You still have the same dual speaker setup and you still have wireless charging. So what's different with the XS? Basically three things. They encompass quite a few, but basically three things. One, faster Face ID. Two, incredible performance thanks to the new A12 Bionic. And three, a revamped dual camera system on the back, which is now the best and most advanced camera Apple has ever put into any iPhone. We're going to break them down one by one and see how much of a difference they make compared to last year's model. So Face ID is a really quick one. There's now a faster, secure enclave built into every XS and XS Max that allows Face ID to authenticate your information quicker. Now, do you actually notice this in day-to-day real-time performance? Yes, you do. Whenever I first started setting up my iPhone XS Max, as soon as I got to the home screen and I was actually able to use Face ID, I noticed immediately how much quicker it was compared to the 10. So yes, all of that sounds like it's kind of made up, but it actually works and you will notice faster Face ID for sure. So the performance on the iPhone XS and XS Max is amazing, and that's driven by the new A12 Bionic processor. And this is easily the star of the show whenever it comes to Apple's new hardware. And we're going to go through exactly how the chip works, so stick with me because it's kind of weird. So CPU-wise, you have hexa-core. 2 cores being dedicated to high performance and 4 being dedicated to power efficiency. GPU-wise, it's quad-core. And there's also an 8-core neural engine which is strictly dedicated to machine learning. Now, the machine learning helps the iPhone in 2 particular ways. One, it helps with camera performance, and we'll get to that later. And 2, it helps your phone, or I guess you could say the phone learns how you'll be using it over time, and it'll learn to best adapt all of those resources that it has in the CPU in order to, 1, give you the best performance, and 2, save the most battery life over time. Now, in terms of battery life, you can only test that by using the phone for a long period, but the performance, I have to say, is absolutely phenomenal. And we even ran a Geekbench score on the iPhone XS, and the single core score was like in the high 4,000s, and the multi-core score was over 11,000, which is way more than we've seen on any flagship phone of 2018, let alone any phone of basically existence. So yeah, the performance on the iPhone XS and XS Max is phenomenal. So I mentioned that the cameras were improved on this year's iPhone, and there are 4 big components that all combine to help you take some amazing shots. Now, the first one is deeper and larger pixels. The second one is an image signal processor. The third one is advanced algorithms created by Apple. And the fourth one is machine learning from the A12 Bionic processor. And like I said, they all combine to give you some excellent benefits whenever you're using this camera. And we're gonna go over some of the really cool benefits that you get. So yeah, the new iPhones are really good point and shoot cameras, but they can go a lot further than that. And when I've used this camera over the last week, I've noticed 2 really good improvements over last year's model. Now, the first one is dynamic range, and Apple calls it Smart HDR. Now, it uses the neural engine and advanced algorithms that Apple's created in order to help distinguish things like shadows or harsh sunlight whenever you're taking photos. And obviously, we're gonna go through and show you the types of photos and videos that we've taken while using this phone, but there were a couple shots that I've taken in direct sunlight, and I've noticed that after taking the shot, the phone does an incredible job of not letting the photo get drowned out by really harsh sunlight, and it balances shadows and colors really well in almost every photo taken. And portrait photos have gotten a lot better as well. Now, the neural engine and the image signal processor work together to help the camera identify a face and subject and the background itself. So it's able to adjust the depth of field to be more accurate compared to the portrait mode found on the iPhone X or any previous models. I would like to say that in my testing, it actually proved to be really accurate, and those cool little filters that you can apply after the fact, they're more accurate this year too, simply because it's able to detect your face and use facial mapping in order to apply those filters more accurately. And something else that's really cool, we've already seen on some Galaxy products, you can actually adjust the blur after the fact when the photo's taken. So those 2 alone add some incredible benefits to what was already a decent portrait mode and took it to a whole new level. So yeah, very good. And another thing, low light photography has also gotten a lot better. So remember when I mentioned deeper and larger pixels? So those help with 2 things. The deeper pixels help with image fidelity, and the larger pixels help more light hit the sensor. And what this leads to is pretty clear and pretty sharp low light shots. And I took a couple on my phone and they actually came out really well. So yeah, low light photography has also been improved. So yes, the A12 Bionic processor and 4 gigs of RAM found on the XS and XS Max lead to exceptional performance. And Apple even promised that with iOS 12, the XS and XS Max would do better than the 10 in terms of battery life. So let's talk about the battery for a second. In terms of hardware, the XS actually uses a slightly smaller battery than the iPhone X, around 2% smaller, so not much of a difference. But the XS Max actually has about 400 milliamp hours more when compared to the iPhone X. Now, Apple said that the iPhone XS can go 30 minutes longer than the iPhone X, and the XS Max can go all the way up to an hour and a half longer than the iPhone X. In real world usage though, we didn't see any of that, did we? No, we didn't. No, we did not. The iPhone XS actually lasted less than an iPhone X did on a single charge by about like an hour or so of screen on time. And the iPhone XS Max obviously did last longer, but the battery pack is also a lot larger. And I had the XS Max and I wasn't too happy with how long the battery lasted considering how big the phone and how big the battery actually is. I would say maybe 45 minutes longer than an iPhone X, definitely not anywhere close to an hour and a half longer. Now there is good news there though. iOS 12 did just come out and Apple has plenty of time to send out patches or new smaller updates to help increase the battery life. But so far as it stands, no. The XS does not last longer than the 10 as far as what we've seen, and the XS Max is only slightly longer in terms of battery life compared to an iPhone X. So yeah, battery life is a little below average. So that's it guys. Those are basically all the new things that the XS and the XS Max bring to the table this year to tempt you to try and buy a phone. Now, pricing and availability. The iPhone XS and XS Max are available in 3 colors now: space gray, silver, and the all-new gold, which I have and I personally think is really, really nice. The iPhone XS starts at $999 for the 64 gigabyte variant, and the XS Max starts at $1,099 for the 64 gigabyte variant. If you want to up those to 256, add $150 to the price. And if you want to go from 256 to 512, add $200 to the price. And yes, this is the first time Apple has ever offered 512 gigs of storage ever on an iPhone. And I just want to throw this out there just for kicks. The iPhone XS Max in 512 gigs of storage is $1,449? Yeah, I believe so. $1,449. And then, just to throw this out there for even more giggles, Apple Care is $200. So you can be spending $1,649 for the top of the line XS Max with the most storage and protection plan. That is absurd. And that brings us to the final question of basically any review. Is it worth you going out and buying it? If you have an iPhone 10, no, definitely not. In fact, I still have my iPhone 10 sitting in my room, and whenever I pick that up, I kind of wonder why I'm even using the XS Max. If you have any other iPhone, 7 or below, I'd say is where, yeah, you can consider upgrading your phone just because of all the benefits that it comes with. I would even say if you have an iPhone 8, you could probably still hold off because you still have the A11 Bionic. So iPhone 8, if you really, really want the design of a 10, then yeah, upgrade. But if you're 7 and below, I'd say that's probably your prime upgrade territory. But if you're 8 and 10, definitely not. But that just about does it for me, guys. I gotta get out of here. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. If that makes sense. So it essentially, why are you recording? Were you recording?
I took a picture.
I like noticed that kind of stuff now.
You looked as soon as I took the picture, man.